This is a story about Esther and an important ring. Esther lived a long time ago. Esther was from a Jewish family, but her parents had died, so she was brought up by her cousin Mordecai. He doted on her and treated her as if she was his own daughter. She was a beautiful girl with a lovely face and figure and a good nature. She was a credit to her family. But Mordecai was careful to tell Esther not to reveal her family background and nationality while she was growing up, and she continued to keep it a secret. Esther and Mordecai lived in the city of Susa in Persia, which was ruled at that time by King Xerxes. In the 3rd year of his reign, Xerxes held a banquet for all of his nobles and officials. It was the most impressive feast anyone had ever seen. Anyone who was anyone was invited to the magnificent feast, and it continued for nearly 6 months. At the end of the feast, a further banquet was held in the palace gardens, and all of the men in the city were invited to the party, which lasted 7 days. This was a way for Xerxes to display his considerable wealth to the ordinary people. No expense was spared in impressing his guests with fine food served on golden platters and vintage wine from goblets of gold. There were beautiful and costly decorations in the gardens, and golden benches to sit on, and a pavement of precious stones to walk on. Everyone was allowed to eat and drink as much as they wanted, and they all had a marvellous time. While this was going on, Xerxes' wife, Queen Vashti, was also holding a banquet for all of her friends and all of the women in the city. King Xerxes commanded his wife to attend his banquet so that he could show her off to the men of the city, as he had all his other possessions and treasures. "No way," replied Queen Vashti, "come to your banquet to be paraded in front of the men and gawped and pawed at? I think not," and refused to leave her chambers. Xerxes was furious with her. He spoke to his special advisors. "You'll have to banish her," they told him, "or she'll set the wrong example, and women all over the kingdom will be refusing to obey their husbands. That would be a disaster. You need to be firm on this. Don't ever let her into your presence again. Make a royal proclamation that she is banished, that women everywhere must obey their husbands, and then find a better woman to be queen, one who will be more obedient." Immediately, Queen Vashti was banished from the palace. A while later, when all of the partying had finished, and Xerxes' anger had subsided, and he was lonely, he remembered his beautiful Queen Vashti and was sorry that he had banished her. He spoke to his personal advisors. "Why not try to find a beautiful new queen?" they said. "You could begin a search all over the kingdom to find the most amazing women. Then you can choose from among them the most beautiful, stunning, gorgeous woman you can find, and then she can become queen." Xerxes was pleased with this idea and ordered his advisors to set about looking for the most beautiful women in the kingdom. The announcement was made, and the process began to find a new queen. Over time, all of the most beautiful women and girls in the kingdom began to arrive at the palace. There they were treated to all sorts of pampering and beauty treatments, anything they wanted, to make sure they looked their absolute best. Then they were brought before the king. Esther was one of the beautiful women chosen to be presented to the king. And when her turn came, Xerxes was very impressed by her. So impressed that he put a crown on her head and proclaimed her the new queen. Then he held a banquet in her honour. He also proclaimed a royal holiday and distributed lavish gifts to the people to celebrate finding his new beautiful queen, Esther. Now, Esther was still quite young, and Mordecai, as her guardian, was worried about her. So he made sure to spend time near the royal palace as much as possible, to make sure he was aware of any gossip. One day, while Mordecai was near the palace, he overheard two of the king's officials plotting against the king. They were planning to assassinate him. Mordecai was worried and got a message to Esther, who was able to inform the king. The officials were investigated and questioned and confessed their plan. Then they were executed. The whole matter was written down in the court diary, then forgotten about. Xerxes had to appoint replacement officials. One of those chosen was Haman. He was given the most important position at court. Everyone had to kneel before Haman and treat him royally. However, Mordecai would only worship God, so refused to honor Haman in this way. Some of the royal officials knew that Mordecai was a Jew, but others asked, why does he disobey the king? Why doesn't he bow down to the most senior official? Haman himself became annoyed that Mordecai would not honor him and swore to get revenge, not only on Mordecai, but the rest of the Jewish people too. Eventually, Haman had the opportunity to bend the ear of the king, sowing seeds of malice against the Jewish people and their customs and their perceived disobedience to the law of the land. Haman even tried to bribe the king to carry out his wishes, offering money to the treasury. The king would not be bribed, but lent his signet ring to Haman to allow him to send out an official edict on the king's behalf. The edict was declared law and sealed with the king's ring and sent all over the kingdom. It commanded that all of the Jewish people in the kingdom were to be killed on a particular day. When they heard this, the Jewish people were in anguish all over the kingdom. They dressed in sackcloth, covered themselves with ashes, and went into mourning with fasting and weeping. Mordecai also went into mourning and went to sit near the palace covered in sackcloth and ashes. Esther's loyal attendants told her that Mordecai was at the gates in mourning. She sent him new clothes, but he refused to wear them. She wanted to know why he was in mourning, so sent her most trusted attendant to find out. Mordecai told about the edict and about the bribe to bring about the destruction of the Jewish people. He urged Esther to go to the king to plead for mercy for the Jewish people. I can't just go in and speak to the king, cried Esther. No one can, not even me. Unless the king calls for you, it is forbidden. Mordecai and Esther continued to converse through her trusted attendant. Even you, Esther, won't be spared, Mordecai reminded her. You may be living in the palace, but you are still one of the Jewish people, and you will still be killed. You have to speak up for all of your people. You are in a special place now, maybe even for this special task, to act on behalf of your people. You have to do it. After a while, Mordecai persuaded Esther. I will speak to the king, she said. I will put my life on the line to do it, so please make sure the people are praying and fasting before I attempt this. I will pray and fast too, and so will my personal attendants. Then I will go in to see the king unbidden and risk his anger. After 3 days of praying to God and fasting, Esther put on her most special robes, made sure she looked her absolute best, and went towards the king's chambers. Fortunately, the king was in a good mood when he saw Esther in the courtyard. Hello, Queen Esther, said the king. Come here. What do you want today? I'm in a good mood. Ask me for anything, even half my kingdom, and you shall have it. What do you want? I have come to invite you to a banquet, O King Xerxes, replied Esther. Please bring Haman with you, and come to enjoy the feast I have prepared for you. I would be delighted. I will send for Haman, and we shall come straight away, said the king. While they were enjoying the lavish food and wine, the king again said to Esther, "What do you want? Even half my kingdom, you can have it. Anything. What is your wish?" Esther replied, "Just one small thing, O King Xerxes. Come to another banquet tomorrow. Bring Haman again too. Then I will tell you what I want." When Haman left the palace that day, Mordecai was the only one not to bow to him as he passed by, and Haman was filled with rage. He was still so angry that he complained to his wife and their friends when he got home. "I am a man of importance," he shouted. "I am a man of great wealth and influence. Even today I attended a banquet, and there was just me and the king at the banquet given by Queen Esther, and she has invited me again tomorrow. But that man, Mordecai the Jew, he refused to acknowledge me. His attitude makes me so angry." "Well," said his friends, "if Mordecai the Jew won't acknowledge your permission, get the king to have him executed. Everyone should respect a man in your position." "Yes, that's a good idea," agreed Haman, and went to set things in place so that this might happen. King Xerxes was having trouble sleeping that night and wanted something to soothe him to sleep. So he asked for the court diaries to be brought and read to him. When he heard about the execution of the officers who plotted to assassinate him, he asked, "What happened to Mordecai, the man who reported this? Didn't he get recognition? Was he rewarded?" "I'm sorry, my lord the king," came the reply. "There is no mention in the diaries that Mordecai was rewarded for his part in this." "Very well, we must do something," said the king, and began to wonder what might be appropriate. At that moment Haman came into the courtyard. "Ah, Haman, come forward," commanded the king. "I have a question for you. If someone pleases the king, what is the best way for the king to show his pleasure and reward that man?" Now, Haman was caught up in his own thoughts and plans, and could only think he himself had found favour with the king. He pondered what he would consider a suitable reward for himself before he spoke. "My lord the king, if a man has found favour in your eyes, he should be dressed in a royal robe, placed on a royal horse, and paraded round the streets of the city, with a man walking before him proclaiming, 'This is what the king will do for those who please him.'" "Yes, that is a fine thing to do," said the king. "Prepare at once. Go and find a robe and my horse. Then find Mordecai and place the robe on him. Place him on my horse, and you yourself go in front of him around the streets, proclaiming my pleasure in his deeds." Mortified, Haman could only do as the king commanded. Then, after leading Mordecai round the streets, proclaiming his virtue, Haman returned home to vent his formidable anger on his wife and their friends. But before he could form a plan of action, the queen's attendants arrived to summon him to Esther's banquet. On the second day of that banquet, when King Xerxes and Haman had eaten much fine food and drunk good wine, again the king asked Esther, "What do you want? Up to half the kingdom will be given to you if you ask for it. Anything. What is your wish from me?" "Oh, my lord the king," began Esther, "this is my desire. Please spare the Jewish people, my people. Do not destroy them. Do not kill them. I and my people have been sold to be destroyed and killed by an adversary. Please save us." "What? Who has done this?" asked the king, growing angry. "It is your servant Haman." "He has done this to us," replied Queen Esther. "He will be punished," said the king, flying into a rage as he left the room. After a few moments, seeing just how annoyed King Xerxes had become, and fearing for his life, Haman went towards the queen to beg for mercy. Just then the king returned and saw Haman seeming to be reaching for the queen, and bellowed, "Leave her alone, you vile little man! How dare you touch the queen? Guards, take him away!" One of the king's most loyal attendants dared to speak. "If it so pleases my lord the king, We know that Haman has set in place the necessary things intending to execute the Jew Mordecai. We can take Haman there and deal with him if it pleases the king." "Go," commanded the king. Haman's lands and property were given to Queen Esther that same day. Esther explained to the king that Mordecai was her relative, and she then appointed Mordecai overseer of Haman's lands and property on her behalf. "But what about the edict?" Esther asked. "Mordecai will take my signet ring and will issue a further proclamation in favor of the Jews," replied Xerxes, handing over his ring to Mordecai. So Mordecai wrote an edict which was published throughout the kingdom. This permitted the Jewish people to protect themselves, to assemble and to kill anyone trying to destroy them, and to plunder the property of their enemies. It was to become law on the very same day that the previous edict, which was royal law and couldn't be revoked, also became active. Mordecai left the palace that day wearing royal robes, as he had found favor with the king, and the ordinary people respectfully honored him. The Jewish people held a feast and began celebrating. Even today, the Jewish people still celebrate this as the festival of Purim every year. They listen to this story being read aloud, enjoy a meal together, give gifts to friends, and make charitable donations. All to remember the brave actions of Esther saving her people.